All right, everyone. Hello, Insiders. This is Michelle from Untapped New York. I am very excited today to have Beth Goff, a New York City licensed tour guide, one of our guides, giving this talk about the scandalous and sensational stories of the Gilded Age, Upper West Side, and Harlem. Would love to hear from where everyone is watching from. Again, Jeffrey Bernard, hello. He appears to be on the Upper West Side with you, Beth. And I'll let Beth take it away.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, yes, welcome everybody. And so glad you all are here on this kind of not so pleasant day, which is actually a perfect day for a lecture about kind of wacky and weird things that happen on the Upper West Side. Like Michelle mentioned, I am a licensed tour guide, and this particular lecture was conceived actually as a walking tour in the Upper West Side. So thankfully, it's well sort of suited to a lecture format. And of course, I think all of us are New York City fans, and the city is full of crazy stories, which is great. So I was able to just kind of glean a few of them to put together into this little collection here. And so I'm going to get started right away because I have a tendency to talk a lot. So let's see, how do I get this thing going here? Wake up. There we go. Okay, so yeah, our miscreants. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start in the Gilded Age of the late 19th century with this famous family member, and then move into early 20th century, pre-World War I, and then into the Jazz Age, flappers and prohibition and all that stuff. So to start our story, we are going to go back to 1895. In Harlem. So yeah, it's not actually the Upper West Side, but it's close enough. And so our main player here is this lady, Mary Alice Livingston Fleming. And you might recognize the name Livingston because it is one of the oldest New York State families. And, you know, it goes back before the Revolution. And of course, we might be familiar with Governor Livingston of New Jersey and Philip Livingston, who was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. And then there was Chancellor Robert Livingston, who administered the oath of office to George Washington downtown at Federal Hall. So during Mary Alice's time in the 1890s, she had a number of family members who were members of the ultra exclusive Astor 400 list. So these people are at the tops of the social and political echelons here. Mary Alice, so she's kind of a little bit distant from, like, on the illustrious family tree. She's sort of on a twig that's kind of far off from the rest of her fabulous family members. So her father was a guy named Judge Joseph Robert Swift Livingston, and old man Livingston literally was old. He was 81 when Mary Alice was born in 1861, and he only lived until Mary Alice was about 5 or 6. And he's a story unto himself. He could have his own little section because he, beyond Mary Alice's mom, he had children with 4 other women, and not necessarily all of them were legally married to him. So all told, he had 11 children. Mary Alice was his last kid, and he was legally married to Mary Alice's mom, who was named Evelina. So Evelina Bliss, Evelina married soon after old man Livingston died. So she married a guy named Henry Hale Bliss, and he was a businessman. And by the time our story comes into play in 1895, the two of them have amicably separated. So the two of them, while they were still married, basically used up most of her bequest from her first husband. So she ended up living in a walk-up apartment on St. Nicholas Avenue in 129th Street. So this is not actually her actual building on the right here, but it was across the street from where her building was situated. All the buildings on that side of the street of St. Nicholas Avenue were raised to make way for St. Nicholas Park. But this is a pretty good example of what she would have lived in. No elevator, walk up, like I mentioned. Were there elevators at that time? Anyway, so Mary Alice in 1894 is 34 years old, and she already had 4 children. She was already notorious for having gone through a breach of promise lawsuit 12 years prior. And what that means is a breach of promise means she had sued the father of her first child because he refused to marry her when she got pregnant. So she sued him. This was a big story at the time, and the trial was called The Sensation of the Hour, and it took place in Brooklyn rather than New York. And there was a crush of press and onlookers every single day, and she ended up winning her suit, and she was awarded a $25,000 judgment, which is a lot in the 1880s. Anyway, so she moves on from there. She has a second child with a different man, and she's not married to him either. So she tries again to sue this guy for a breach of promise, and this time she was not successful. I think her reputation probably preceded her at this point. And later on, she has a third child with this guy, Ferdinand Wilkes, who was a German coffin maker. And she is pregnant with her 4th kid, who is also Ferdinand's kid. They are not married either, and they continue a pretty public relationship. So she kind of follows in her father's footsteps a little bit, not really adhering to the mores of the day and kind of doing whatever the heck they wanted. So Mary Alice and her 4 kids are living in the Colonial Hotel, which no longer exists. If you know the corner of 8th Avenue and 125th Street, I believe it was the corner where the Magic Johnson movie theater is now. So they're living there. Henry Helpless, her stepfather, is also living there, and he is supporting them, which is really nice of him. Evelina, mom, is 4 blocks away, and the rest of them are all here at the hotel. So the story goes that on the afternoon of August 30th, 1895, Evelina is home alone. It's late summer, school is about to start again, and she enjoys a visit from 2 of her grandkids. So this would be Gracie and Averill. These are the 2 youngest kids, and then a friend of Gracie's is along with them. So they have a nice time, they go home. And then later that evening, a family friend named Augustus Teubner comes to visit Evelina. But by this time, Evelina is really feeling horrible, and she's doubled up over in pain, and she's vomiting. And she says to him, "I am going to die. I've been poisoned by my relatives who are trying to get my money." He summons a doctor, and unfortunately, though, she's kind of beyond help, and she is dead by 11 o'clock that night. This is very suspicious. So a chemical expert is brought in to test the vomit that was there, and as well as dregs of clam chowder that were found in a pitcher that was in the kitchen. And in addition, there was also an autopsy that was done. The results of all these tests are conclude that she suffered from arsenic poisoning. So since there's no evidence of any other type of foul play like theft or rape or something like that, the only suspect is the daughter, Mary Alice Livingston Fleming. So by the way, Fleming is the last name of the father of Mary Alice's first kid. So she kind of appropriated that name. So anyway, so Mary Alice Livingston Fleming, she's the only suspect. She's arrested for the murder of her mother. And before she's taken to jail, she is allowed to attend her mom's funeral at Greenwood Cemetery. She's attended by 2 very large detectives. And as soon as this is over, she's whisked across the river to the tombs. And you guys might be familiar with this term. We still do have a tombs here in the city, but it's now the Manhattan Detention Center. It looks nothing like this. But this is the first iteration of the tombs in Lower Manhattan. So she's incarcerated there for 6 months. And 3 months into her incarceration, she gives birth to baby number 4, whose name is Robert Livingston Fleming, whom she calls Robin. And Robin, baby Robin, becomes very popular with her fellow inmates in the women's wing of the tomb. And he's considered the pet baby of the tombs. Isn't that so sweet? So the trial finally comes to pass, and the prosecution's story goes like this. We already know Evelina's home alone. We know that the kids visit her, but the prosecution says that Mary Alice sends them to Evelina's apartment with a tin pail of clam chowder and a slice of pie. And so this is an example of a menu from the Colonial Hotel. And by the way, the clam chowder is the creamy kind from New England. And so before she sends them on the errand with the food, she spikes the clam chowder with enough arsenic to kill an adult. Now, fortunately, the kids were not interested enough in the food, and they didn't sample any of it, which is really good. And, you know, like who thinks about sending their little children with a murder weapon to kill their mom? It's really twisted, right? So the factors, the motives in the case, according to the prosecution, were Mary Alice did have a sizable Livingston fortune in wait for her, but it was in trust, and the trust was not accessible until Evelina's passing. So Mary Alice did try to overturn the strictures of the trust in court, but she was not successful. So at the same time, her stepfather, Henry Bliss, who had been taking care of them financially, was growing tired of the arrangement, and he had informed her that he was going to end the arrangement. Then, of course, there's her behavior, which Evelina is really disgusted by, and they had arguments about this several times. So what is Mary Alice going to do at this point? She's got 4 kids. She's never married. She is seriously damaged goods to society in 1895. So mouths needed feeding and expenses needed to be met. So what are her options? Oh, kill her mom. So on the flip side, on the defense, so Mary Alice, when she was put on the stand, or when she showed up in court even, she was very well presented. Here's not a particularly attractive image of Mary Alice and her half-sister, Florence. But, you know, she was very well dressed. She was wearing, she was in black because she was in mourning for her mother. And she had had very good schooling when she was growing up. She had actually attended the Mount St. Vincent, or the St. Vincent School in Riverdale. This was run by the Sisters of Charity. And if you guys are familiar with the north end of Central Park, the Sisters of Charity did have a convent there, and they moved to Riverdale. So she had good schooling. So she had very good comportment. She spoke very well. So she presented a good figure on the stand. Her attorneys presented an abundance of lines of defense to the jury. Maybe they wanted to overwhelm them with a lot of different things. So a couple of their lines of defense were, they suggested that Evelina had already had some underlying medical conditions, maybe with her heart or her kidneys, and that served to kill her. They said they used ptomaine poisoning, which is sort of a catch-all phrase for food poisoning, that perhaps in the 4-block walk between the Colonial Hotel and Evelina's walk-up, the chowder had turned and got her, you know, it was so bad that made her sick and caused her to pass away. Then they theorized, this is an interesting one, they theorized that Evelina was an arsenic eater. So this is something apparently that women did in the 19th century. They would ingest small amounts of arsenic, and this would serve to bring blood to the face and give them a nice healthy glow by using poison. And then there's always the good standby, well, Evelina just committed suicide. She just couldn't stand living any longer, which is ridiculous. So anyway, the stakes are really high in a murder case like this. There are only two options. There's either you're considered innocent or you are guilty of murder. And if you're guilty of murder, the verdict is death, or the person is killed. So anyway, so if she were found guilty, Mary Alice Livingston Fleming would have been the very first female to have been executed in the newfangled electric chair up the river in Ossining at Sing Sing prison. So what was the verdict? Well, it turns out that Mary Alice was considered innocent. She was not convicted of killing her mother. And the prosecution had a strong case. Even the judge was shocked by this. And why? Well, there's an infant waiting for mommy back in the jail cell at the Tombs every day. Baby Robin is waiting for her. And then there are 3 other kids that are also waiting for mommy to come home. And the jury may well have thought that she was innocent, was guilty of killing her mother, but they just couldn't get past the thought of sending a mom of 4 to her death. So they acquitted her. So, which is, wow. So anyway, thus exonerated, she is granted her Livingston inheritance. So I like this. This is a photograph that appeared in a New York, well, it's a drawing of a photograph that appeared in a New York City paper. And if you guys have been watching The Alienist, that show was set almost exactly in the same time period as this trial had occurred. So I love the comparison between what she's wearing, this is morning, and what Dakota Fanning and the other women were wearing in the TV show. It's kind of cool. So in any case, a couple of years later, gold is found in the Yukon, and for whatever reason, I wasn't unable to discern this, Mary Alice decides that she wants to go to the Yukon and see what's happening. So she leaves the 2 younger kids with Florence, the half-sister, and she takes the oldest kid, Walter, 3 youngest kids, sorry. She takes the oldest kid, Walter, with her to the Yukon. There's some newspaper accounts up there, but not specifically what she was doing. But she did get married to a guy named Harry Fry, and she had 2 more kids, so 6 kids in total. And then she ends up returning to the city, but without Harry Fry. No explanation there either. So thereafter, Mary Alice and her 4 kids go on to lead fairly uneventful lives. And she lives until 1948, and she dies when she's 87 years old, which is about the same age that her father died, unlike her mother, who was killed at age 53. So that's Mary Alice, but I do have a postscript concerning Mary Alice's stepfather, Henry Bliss. So remember him on the left. So 4 years after Henry lost his ex-wife, Evelina, poor Henry has a distinction of being the first person in the Western Hemisphere to be killed by an automobile. So he stepped off a trolley on the corner of Central Park West and 74th Street, and he is promptly run over by an electric taxi cab, which is very similar to what you see here on the right. So unfortunately, he had very gruesome injuries that they were unable to take care of, and he passed away the following morning of his injuries. So that's a very sad end to Henry Bliss. And the funny thing is, there is this sign here that's on the light pole on the corner, and I live in the neighborhood, and I never noticed the sign until I was playing Pokemon a couple of years ago, and I happened to notice it, and I was like, wow, this is a really interesting event that happened right here on this corner. So that is our story of our murder by chowder story. It's not particularly uplifting, but these stories really aren't uplifting. So we will move on to our next Upper West Side. This does happen on the Upper West Side. And we've got our moral imbecile here. So this lovely couple, Dr. Arthur Waite, Clara Peck Waite, these two were from Michigan and they were high school classmates. So they knew each other back in high school. And then they reconnected after he graduated from dental school. And they had a relationship, they fell in love, and they got married in 1915. Now, Clara Peck, her father was a wealthy businessman and pharmacist back in Michigan, and her mom was concerned about her future. By the time it was about the 1914, 1915, she was already in her 20s, and she was sort of approaching old maid territory at this point. So this match was a good match. He's a doctor and he's handsome. Look how handsome he is. So they get married and they move to New York City. And Clara's father kindly purchases for them a 4-bedroom apartment in the Coliseum, which some of you might be familiar, on 116th and Riverside Drive. So this is Columbia University area. It's a lovely building. And so he purchases, he furnishes, and he provides them a $50,000 dowry, which is really fantastic. The catch is, though, that this dowry is portioned into $300 monthly increments. So it will take many, many years for this dowry to be provided in completion. So in the meantime, Dr. Waite goes to work for a family friend who also happens to be a relative of the Pecks. His name is Dr. Jacob Cornell. And so in the late winter of 1915, so it's not too long after they're married, Clara's parents come to visit and they stay with them at the Coliseum. Not too long after their arrival, though, Hannah, who is Clara's mom, she falls ill and she's got nausea and vomiting and she's just really not doing well at all. And she dies at the end of January 1916, which is, really unfortunate. So they take her back to Michigan and then they return again to the city. And John Peck, her father, returns to visit with them in about February of 1916, and then he's dead by mid-March of the same year. So you can tell that there's a pattern happening here. Clara was beginning to suspect her husband after her mother passed away, because the whole death was really kind of questionable anyway, but she couldn't possibly have considered just that he would do anything so extreme. But she was wrong. So what was Dr. Peck actually doing? He wasn't spending a lot of time at work. Instead, he was playing a lot of tennis. He was a champion tennis player, and he was also taking French lessons at Berlitz. So not only did he learn a new language, but he met a lovely friend named Margaret Horton. Now, this is a pretty lady. And so Margaret is taking lessons, and she happens to be married as well, but her husband doesn't seem to be too concerned that these two are going off and having dinner together, dancing, taking long walks. And Waite eventually even rents a salon apartment at the Plaza Hotel for when they have no other engagements. So, he's enjoying his life. Clara, I'm not sure what she's thinking at this point, but circumstances start to change for Dr. Waite when his boss, Dr. Cornell, wanted to pay his last respects to Clara's father, John, before John is shipped back to Michigan for the funeral. And Dr. Waite refuses him this opportunity, and Dr. Cornell is just incensed by this, and he tells a story to another relative of all of these people, a girl named Elizabeth Hardwick. So she's here with Clara. Clara is already in her mourning outfit. So Elizabeth Hardwick is, something sprang to her mind. She remembered an occasion where she saw Waite having a meal together with Margaret Horton. And she puts two and two together here, and she sends a telegram to Clara's brother Percy, who was still in Michigan. And so she says this: suspicion aroused, demand autopsy, do not reveal telegram. And she signs it with the pseudonym. So I'm thinking that she's already she's worried about this guy, Dr. Waite. She's kind of scary about him. So Waite tries to have John Peck cremated, but Percy's already taken control of the body. The autopsy is done. And of course, we find out that, yes, his death was caused by foul play. Imagine that. So Clara and Waite return to New York City, and Waite knows he's in trouble at this point, and he tries to commit suicide. He does not succeed, and he is arrested and taken down to the Tombs to await trial for murder. So I love this photograph. Here he is at the courthouse, and like this whole collection of guys around him, they just look like a cartoon. And particularly the guy on the right, doesn't he look like a Warner Brothers character with the head and the eyes? And he's like, well, who is this guy? So anyway, at the trial, Waite confessed to all the details of this scheme. So his strategy was to use the moral imbecile defense. And moral imbecile is an outdated term that's ascribed to eugenics, which thankfully is also outdated. And a definition of moral imbecile is, or are, persons from an early age display some permanent mental defect coupled with strong vicious or criminal propensities on which punishment has had little or no deterrent effect. So stating straight out what he did, he expected the jury to consider him so diabolically mentally ill that he could just not be considered sane and in control of his actions. So this way he would avoid the most severe penalty. And so, of course, what the motive is money. The Pecks have a lot of it. So he was going to kill the elder Pecks. And then Clara, when she inherited her portion of the vast estate, he would then go on and kill her too. Simple as that. So Waite, of course, never loved Clara. And at the trial, he said this is a close-up of Clara. He said that Clara was not my equal in anything. When I got rid of her, I meant to find a more beautiful wife. So such a human being. It was a really good match, right? So the murder weapons, this is what really drew me to the story. The murder weapons were really unique. So Waite used a variety of bacterial agents that were found conveniently stocked in Dr. Cornell's office. And there were some transcriptions of the trial that I located, and what he said about killing Hannah, he used 6 assorted tubes of pneumonia, diphtheria, and influenza germs in her meals. When she finally fell ill and went to bed, he ground up 12 barbiturate tablets and gave her those too. So this went on for a while until she finally succumbed one night. And he would periodically go in and check on her. And when he finally found her dead this one night, he was satisfied. He went back to bed so that Clara, when she awoke, she could be the one to find her mother's body. Such a nice guy. So in any case, John Peck proved more difficult to kill. So again, the transcript said, I used to insert tubes of typhoid, influenza, and diphtheria in his soups and rice puddings. Nothing seemed to affect him, so I used to let off the occasional tube or two of chlorine gas in his bedroom, hoping the gas would weaken his resistance. So no such luck. So he's impatient to end Mr. Peck, so he threw caution to the wind, and he administered a large dose of arsenic, which was traceable, as we already know. So it did finally do the trick, but Percy Peck's autopsy came to the rescue and confirmed the manner of death. Now, who knows, if Waite were more patient and just let the germs do what they were going to do, there might not have been any sort of material incriminating evidence to point to him. But maybe he was an imbecile. So anyway, the proverbial nail in the coffin was provided by his Berlitz companion, Margaret Horton. And she provided a letter that he had written to her. And the letter in court said, in part, he says in the letter, if they prove it, I suppose it would mean la chaise, the chair, but I hope and expect to spend a while in detention as an imbecile, and then I'll be free again to join you. So, well, no, Arthur Waite was sentenced to lachaise, and he was 30 years old when he was electrocuted at Sing Sing prison, again in Ossining up the river in 1917. So Clara Peck went on to marry later, and she had 2 children, and hopefully she had a much better union with her second husband, and she ended up passing away in 1964. So I'm seeing a lot of comments going in the chat, and Michelle is going to kind of compile these, and we're going to, I'll answer all sorts of questions. I love questions, so I answer them at the end of this. So keep your questions out there for us. And so anyway, we are moving on to our third story, and this one is set in the, well, I hope you're still with me. This one's not a murder, but it is still kind of creepy. And so it's set in the freewheeling, jazz age, flapper, silent film, the Charleston, all sorts of, wild and crazy stuff. So this is also, this building and its sort of sister buildings are situated on the Upper West Side. So I wonder if any of you Upper West Siders are actually familiar with these, because they are very distinctive from the surrounding brownstones. These are part of my neighborhood, and I've seen these for years. And what I never noticed about these buildings until I actually started doing the research is you can see this monogram on the right here. It's on the 3rd story of the building, and it's EWB. And that stands for Edward West Browning. And he is one half of our last pair here, Edward West Browning and Frances Heenan. So Peaches and Daddy. So this is a fun story. We'll get to Frances in a minute, but just more about Edward Browning. He was, well, his obituary said that he was one of the largest owners of income producing real estate moguls in New York City. And so, like I said, these 4 buildings. He built another one called the World's Tower. Yeah, World's Tower building in Midtown. And it's also clad in white terracotta like these, but they're much tall. It's much taller. And of course, he owned hundreds of buildings around the city. So he was super wealthy. So he grew up a wealthy Upper West Sider. His father was not a realty guy. He was in, trying to remember, he was a merchant, I think, of some sort. So this building on the left, this is where he grew up. And I love, there is a book about these two, but there's not a whole lot about Browning's upbringing. And I'd love to know more, because it must have shaped the way he behaved in his adult. And you'll see what I mean about this. So he is a bachelor for a very long time. He doesn't get married until he's 41. And he meets a young woman named Nellie Adele Lowen. And in 1915, so this 1915 is the same time frame as Waite and Peck. So these two get married. He gave her anything his wealth could provide. Like I said, just super wealthy. He purchased this penthouse apartment, the top 2 floors of this building on 81st Street, which is right across the street from the Natural History Museum. So this might be familiar to some of you all as well. These two couldn't have children, and I don't know if it was a physical thing, like between the one or the other, or maybe Adele actually didn't want to. Who knows? I don't know, speculating. But in any case, they couldn't have kids. So in the style of Daddy Warbucks from the Little Orphan Annie cartoon strip, they decide to adopt 2 young girls. So they adopt a girl named Marjorie and another one named Dorothy. The younger one, Dorothy, Browning gives the nickname Sunshine. So from henceforth, she is Dorothy Sunshine. And Browning builds this fantastic rooftop playland for these two girls. It's got a rowboat pond in it. It's got caged birds and Japanese lanterns and bells, and it's just a wonderful place for, you know, two little kids growing up in the, you know, in the teens. But apparently it wasn't so wonderful for Adele. She's bored by daddy, or well, he's not daddy yet. She's bored by her husband, and she enters into an affair with a dentist, another dentist, but not the same dentist. These two flee to France, and they take the older girl, Marjorie, with them. And Browning is just not only is he very sad by this, but of course he's incensed, and he brings the, you know, the weight of his wealth to bear, and he goes to France. He follows them, and they are divorced. And so Marjorie and Adele are cut out. So several years later, it's 1923, Dorothy Sunshine is now 11, and her father thinks that she needs a sister. So what does he do? He places an ad in the papers for, and you can see it here, for pretty refined girl, blah, 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 every desirable luxury, opportunity, education, travel, kindness, care, love, all this stuff. And I guess this was a thing that happened in the early 20th century, putting ads in papers for all sorts of odd things. So he receives 12,000 applications, and he settles on this young woman on the right, Mary Louise Spaz. And again, he is so happy to have another daughter, and again provides her with anything her heart could desire as a child. And now with the papers getting involved, the press is really interested in Edward Browning, and they follow him everywhere, and he likes this. He likes the attention, which again is just so, like, did he not, is he filling in for something he didn't have in his childhood? You know, who knows? But anyway, the press never let go of Edward Browning after this. So this is actually not such a good thing for him, or maybe it is, because the press decides, or they discover, that Mary Louise Spaz is not 16, she's 21, and she's an adult. And this is just so shocking and demoralizing to Edward Browning. And who knows what poor Dorothy Sunshine thought about this, but he immediately has this adoption annulled. Several years go by again, and so Daddy, well, actually at this point he is Daddy. The press gave him a couple of nicknames. Cinderella Man is one, and then Daddy's the other one, and Daddy is the one that really sticks. So Daddy, I mean, he is a businessman, and he works a lot on his real estate empire. This guy's the real deal, and I'll leave it at that. So, but he's also downcast. He's really disappointed by this adoption thing, and he starts attending youthful social functions and dances. And when I'm saying youthful, I'm talking girls in middle school and high school. And again, the press is really interested in this. They follow him everywhere. And they're printing sort of negative connotations about this, which is realistic, right? But he doesn't mind that. He says that he's doing this all in the name of philanthropy, because he's also providing money to these organizations. And he started up a sorority for high school girls, which I'd never heard of. So anyway, moving on, he attends a dance that's given by a sorority, and in March of 1926, he sees this young woman, our friend Frances Heenan here. So he is smitten by her. She's 15, okay, but they dance all night. They have a wonderful time. Some enchanted evening. So a little bit about Peaches, she's not Peaches yet, but again, Frances Heenan. She lives with her mom. in Washington Heights. Her mom's name is Carolyn, and her father lives on Long Island. Carolyn and her father are separated and still in touch with each other, but he's out of the picture in terms of caring for her. So Frances is, you can kind of see here, she's developed, you sort of can kind of see her, but she's well developed for her age. And Milton Berle, why is he here in this picture? Well, Milton Berle did a show in 1925, and Frances and a bunch of her young friends attended the show, and then they waited for him backstage to get his autograph. And so Milton Berle actually writes about this in his autobiography, and he says, "One girl interested me in particular. She was cute and a little on the plump side, and inside her midi blouse, there was a lot of woman developing. I was sort of interested until I asked her age, and she told me she was 14. I decided not to be interested." And that was Frances Heenan. So despite Milton not being interested in Frances, young Frances, she did have a lot of boyfriends at the time, and the boys that she dated were older than she. She preferred older men, men, and she kept a diary of all of her experiences and the boys that she had her experiences with, and that's going to come into play a little bit later. So in the meantime, but Milton's out, the boys are out, and Daddy is her man. So they have a very public relationship, and you can see them enjoying a variety of things. It's just so odd, including the goose. And so he took her shopping and all sorts of, again, the money sort of spoke to everything here. And at the same time with the shopping, and I'll show you a picture of that in a second, but the press followed them everywhere. And you can see here, this is one of Peach's $1,000 shopping sprees that she would go on. She would she would be driven in Daddy's peacock blue Rolls Royce to go shopping. And the crush, this is real. It's probably a combination of both the press and onlookers. There's some women in here, it's kind of hard to see, but of course the little arrow is pointing to Peach's cloche hat. So Damon Runyon, if you might know his name from Guys and Dolls as the writer, he was also a newspaperman, and he called them shameless publicity mutts, and that's exactly what they were. They loved this attention, and Daddy had instructed that when she went shopping, each item that she purchased should go in an individual box or bag so that she would exit the store with just an enormous collection of items that would be stuffed into the Rolls Royce, and then she'd be whisked away. So again, I guess, this is the 1920s. It's, kind of anything goes, so to speak. But on the flip side of this, there is an organization called the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Children, and they are also known as the Gary Society, or the SPCC, and they are investigating this whole affair because we know that Peaches she's a minor. And so they concluded that Carolyn, Peaches' mom, she was a poor guardian for her daughter, and I guess that the father was just not even a thought, and they threatened to remove Peaches from Carolyn's control. So this was very scary for the three of them, Peaches, Daddy, and Carolyn. And so they decide that Peaches and Daddy are going to get married, and this way she'll be legally bound to Daddy Browning, and they'll be untouchable by the SPCC. So with the sign off from both Peaches' mom and father, Peaches, Daddy, and Carolyn sneak up to Cold Spring, New York at the end of March in 1926, and they are married and out of the reach of the SPCC. So it's not even, they haven't even been together for a month, and they're married. And remember, of course, Peaches is 15 years old. She's not yet 16. So now she's 16. And this is her birthday party at the Victory Club on West 59th Street. And here's her three-story birthday cake that looks like a wedding cake. And she's wearing her 1,000 gem bracelets and a very pretty dress, I think. So we have here Peaches with the knife, obviously, Daddy to her left, and her mom, Carolyn, is just over her left shoulder. And little Dorothy Sunshine is looking on at the knife and probably wondering what the heck she's gotten into. So it's all happy times. And moving on, they go on vacations. Daddy gives Peaches $300 weekly to spend on whatever she wants. So that, over $1,000 a month in the 1920s, that's a lot of money. Carolyn gets money also for her expenses. And he does have a number of residences, but they seem to have taken up residence at the Kew Gardens Inn in Queens. Don't know too much about this place, but it looks nice here. So the largesse is wonderful, but despite all of this, the marital bliss lasted less than a year. So mother and daughter fled the Kew Gardens Inn in October 1926. They empty the closets, they dump out the drawers, they take everything that's not nailed down, and they're out of there. And then Peaches files suit against Daddy, her husband. And surprising, maybe not. So here's an interesting thing about marital law in New York State. Before 1969, the state did not recognize grounds for divorce except for proof of adultery. So the best Peaches could hope for was a separation, and I guess some sort of a monetary settlement of some sort. So in the trial, Peaches claimed abnormal and unnatural practices, as if his attraction to children wasn't unnatural enough. So being chased around by that goose that you might have seen in that picture a couple of frames back, she observed him, Daddy, crawling around barking, and penuriousness, which is an odd claim given all of the generosity that he provided to both she and her mom. Browning, on the other hand, is just crushed by this. He really loved his wife, Peaches. And however, again, he brought all the weight of his wealth to bear, and he had the best attorneys that money could buy. And one of his, and he denied, of course, all of these claims and whatever else Peaches had said. And he also said that he was dismayed that Carolyn the mom was just so ever present that they could never be alone with each other and, do what couples did. Peaches did say that they did what couples did. So that's not completely true. Also, remember that diary that had all the details about all of her little conquests. She submitted a diary to the judge, but this was not the actual diary. She'd actually she'd forged a diary that did not have all the details of the original diary. So she was claiming to be much more chaste than she actually was. But that was soon overturned. It was figured out, somehow they figured out that this was not the real diary, and the real one was presented, which was, not good for her case. But before I get to the verdict, this is interesting. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the New York Evening Graphic and their composigraphs, but so the graphic, the graphic and the press in general had a field day with this. Remember, these two love to have the attention of the press. And even during the trial, they both were talking to the press, which, who knows how legal that was. But the composograph or the graphic was a different kind of thing. What these guys did was when they came into prominence before Peaches and Daddy, and they had sold thousands of papers with these composographs. So their point of existence was to give readers glimpses into situations that would be impossible otherwise for traditional newspapers to achieve. So what they did here is that they would draw up, or they would set up a set and bring in models and have an artist draw up what they saw, and then for the faces they would cut out actual photographs of the real people and paste them into the drawing and then print them in their papers. And this thing, hugely successful. Like I said, they sold thousands of issues in general, but the circulation just reached record levels with Peaches and Daddies. It was huge. And you see here on the left image here with the goose, which was it was a thing. Hong Kong, it's the bonk, became a catchphrase. Like people would just say this outside. This is how big these things were. So just everything about this story is just so lurid and bizarre. So anyway, on to the verdict. The judge found that Peaches' claims were all specious. He ruled for Daddy, and in part, his statement said about Daddy, he may be a man of peculiar character, tastes, and ideas, but he had raised both he and women above their social stations and improved their lives. So my summary is, well, Daddy was a dirty old man, but mother and daughter were gold diggers of the highest order. So Peaches ended up with nothing from the lawsuit at all. And of course, as we know, she remained married. So 8 years later, it's 1934, and Daddy succumbs to the results of a cerebral hemorrhage that he had suffered, and his only family constant was Dorothy Sunshine. She never gave up on her father, and she was with him at the end. Now Peaches, she went into well, she had gone into theater, and then after Daddy died, remember they were still married, she received a $6,000 dower interest in his will. And yeah, like I said, she did some theater, and then she married and divorced twice over after Daddy had passed away. So I guess that second or third marriage, there was some adultery happening there. So she was able to marry again. And then remember Milton Berle from before, they reconnected, and they had a tryst for several months that went on. And he said again in his book, she was fun and easy to be with. We just enjoyed each other every way a man and woman can. Isn't that lovely? So August 1956, now her mother, she's still with her mother, Carolyn, and Carolyn found Peaches collapsed in the bathroom. She had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage, and she passed away, and an autopsy revealed that Peaches had liver disease caused by alcoholism, and Peaches was only 46 years old. So both of their deaths were newsworthy because of who they were, but the coverage was not nearly as extreme as it was in the 1920s when the two of them had their super public romance and marriage and divorce. So I'm at the end, but one last thing I'll say about this particular story is that, as you can tell, there's really no protagonist in this story. Reading about the separation trial, I kept rooting for Daddy to win, because Peaches, she was so obviously a liar, and she was just obnoxious. Yeah, she was just not, an empathetic character or sympathetic character. But at the same, then I had to keep telling myself, hello, Daddy is basically a pedophile, and he's a nasty creep. So you can't really, you can't root for him either. One nice thing I can say about him is that he did use his money for philanthropic purposes. So he did some good with his life, but it's wacky and crazy. So that said, these are our three stories. So, if you have questions, I'll ask Michelle to bring them on. let me know.
Beth. I love these glimpses into old New York, from like the terms like Daddy. I just read a whole book about a bootleg king that was, well, I won't give it away, but amazing book about Prohibition, and his wife also called him Daddy.
Hmm.
I've seen that also in, I think, like Boardwalk Empire. So anytime there was like an older husband and younger wife, she would call them daddy, which is super weird to us today, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so thank you for sharing that with us. So there were a couple questions about the Bliss family. Some noted that there's a Bliss in Queens, so Mary Carter and Richard Previtt also talked about that. So wondering if there's a connection to Neziah Bliss, who founded Blissville, and the Bliss family, which I know is pretty obscure. So
It is obscure. You know what? I don't know. And now I'm going to have to look that up.
yeah.
But, and I'm writing it down.
I did find a Brooklyn Historical Society piece about a Bliss estate in South Brooklyn. So it might have just been a name that was around, you know.
Might have been. But here is, now this came up when I did this lecture another time, and I didn't have the answer at that time, but now I do. That Henry and Evelina had 3 kids, and one of them was, I think it was Henry. I think it was Henry Bliss Jr. or Walter or something like that. But he did go on to a very prominent and successful role in developing a different type of cataloging system for libraries. It's called the Bliss system, I think. And it did go against the Dewey Decimal System, but it was not brought into use here. But it is used in libraries, I think, overseas, in England maybe, and also in maybe scientific libraries. So he definitely did make something of his life. And he also was not very kind. He was not happy with Mary Alice. He thought that she did it.
Jeffrey Bernard says he sees the Bliss name at the Met Museum. So it must have been a family widely dispersed around New York. Joseph Rosenberg mentions, just as a comment, that the $300 incremental dowry in 1915 would be equivalent to $7,700 today. Look at that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So there's still a decent amount of money.
Yeah. And then we had a fun discussion about moral imbeciles and the temporary insanity plea. So I put some information in the chat. So someone asked, did Harry Thaw get off on moral imbecility? And I think from what I know, it was temporary insanity, but there were different names for it. And the general term was called dementia americana. And I shared a story about a case that took place at what's now Flushing Town Hall. And it's the last case that they were able to try to use the temporary insanity defense, or kind of like, there's another term for like lovers, like, I don't know, but meaning like a man was so jealous that he was justified in killing his wife because of her behavior. So that's the case that kind of struck that down. But what's interesting about the case is that there were 2 people on trial. I mean, a man and his brother, or a friend. And so the friend, or the other character, was tried on dual dual insanity, which means he like caught the insanity disease and therefore also was temporarily insane. So it's just kind of a fun, crazy story happening in New York. Oh yes, crime of passion. So anyways, fascinating stuff. Pete Tennant asks, where is the building where the EBW monogram is located?
Oh, yes. Okay. So there are 4 of them. So there is one on 73rd Street between Columbus and Amsterdam. There is one on 72nd Street between Central Park, between Columbus and Amsterdam again. And then there is one on 71st Street. And there are 4 of them. So where's the other one? But they're all clustered in the lower 70s.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And then Eileen has a comment. She says she actually lived in 35 West 81st Street before moving to North Carolina 4 years ago.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, that's cool.
Oh, cool.
Let's see. So I think that's mostly it. Elliot shared the song "My Heart Belongs to Daddy" by Cole Porter about a sugar daddy and his gold digger. So I commented that it was indeed a thing about these.
I love that.
Okay, great. Well, I've shared Beth's tipping information, Venmo and PayPal, and it's also on the screen. So if you should care to do that. and I'm going to just talk about some upcoming events as well. So tomorrow we are co-partnering with Village Preservation, Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation on the event about Walking Broadway, which is a new book out, and it's a guidebook. It's fun for me since I too have a book about Broadway, not a guidebook, but a photo book. And then I also did an event with the other book about Broadway by Fran Leiden, which is more of a historical analysis of development of Broadway. So a lot of fun things that should come up in that talk. Not on the calendar yet, but next Tuesday, Justin Rivers is going to do his tour of Martha's Vineyard of Edgartown. And I just did a preview today, and it's very exciting and a nice little kind of seaside adventure for all of us that may not be able to get there this summer or have never been. And then Beth and I may be doing a little thing at the opening of the new Women's Monument, Central Park. So stay tuned for that. We're still confirming the details. And then we've got Peggy Gavan coming back to give a tour, not about seafaring cats, but now about the dogs of Gotham. So that's next Thursday. So that's awesome. And Beth, you're getting some great comments in the chat, if you can see it. Truly terrific as always, Beth. Great talk. Richard is not in New York City often, but he really appreciates the story. You rock, Beth. The other book about Broadway, I believe it's just called Broadway, Matthew, and it's by Fran Leiden. And then, of course, the one coming up is called Walking Broadway. So that's on Thursday. That's the talk tomorrow. A very interesting talk. Thanks, Beth, says Lorraine. And Sugar Daddy was named for Adolf Spreckler, the San Francisco sugar magnate who was sugar daddy to Alma. Fun. Lots of daddies around. And the book that I was mentioning is called The Ghosts of Eden Park. The Bootleg King, the Women Who Pursued Him, and the Murder That Shocked Jazz Age America. Putting a link to that in the chat because I devoured that in like 24 hours. It was so good. And really parts of Prohibition that you didn't know about. But the man who's at the center of the story actually controlled maybe over 40% of all of America's liquor during Prohibition. So he was a big guy. So awesome. So see you guys all tomorrow, next week. Beth, anything to add at the end?
Yes, just one quick thing is so these are 3 stories out of my walking tour, 6 stories. So it's possible we could do another 3, the remaining 3 at some other point. So
if you guys want part 2, please let us know by email or in the chat. And and then Beth does this, of course, in real life. So, we got an absolutely part 2 would be great from a few people. Yes. So, all right. Okay, now it's flooding in. So we will schedule a part 2 for September. I just wanted to put a call out for anyone that is in New York still. We do have a tour of the public art of Lower Manhattan this Sunday in person with Alan Cohen, our guide. So all members get 2-for-1 tickets with the code Welcome Back. So if you'd like to join us, we'll be out there. All right.
Cool.
Lots of requests for part 2. So we will get that on the schedule. All right. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Beth. And see you all soon. Bye.
Bye.